To say in God we trust is to provide a democracy with its proper ground.
Neil, in the 70s, this is the tragic turn of American culture. What the hell happened that money became everything? What happened?
Some of you may have seen the survey that came out about a year ago, March of 2023, in the Wall Street Journal, and I'm still thinking about this this survey. It's a survey of Americans which asks them what things in their life, what values in their life do they treasure or value the most, are most important to them. They did this same survey 25 years before 23. So in 1998, these were the results. In 1998, 70% of respondents said patriotism was the most important value. 62% religion was among the most important values. 59% said having children, family, were the most important values. Dropping below 50, community came in at 47%, and money came in last at 31%, the most important values. That was in 1998. Now, in 1998, I was alive, you were alive, a lot of you were alive. We thought things were in really bad shape in 1998, right? Things were really trending in bad
Monica
ways.
Lewinsky.
Right. Here's the results in 2023, the same exact survey. And I'm going to read them in the reverse order. So, fifth place. So I gave you the 1 to 5. Fifth place, community, 27%. That's a loss of 20 points. Fourth place, having children, family, came in at 30%. That's a loss of 29 points. Third place, patriotism, 38%. That's a drop of 32 percentage points. Second place, religion came in at 39%. That's a drop of 23 percentage points. And first place, money, which was in last, came in at 43%, still below 50%, interestingly, but that's the only one that rose by 12 percentage points. We've undergone a revolution in 25 years. If that's not a revolution, I'm not sure what. So Obergefell may have been a kind of punctuation on the revolution, but I think if you look at these trend lines, what makes a civilization robust and healthy, I would say it more or less tracks when we value the right things, which include things like family, religion, nation, community. Then you can say your civilization is probably reasonably healthy. But where all of those have dropped well below 50%, and the only one that's risen is money, we're in trouble.
Our society has undergone a revolution. Our society has completely changed. This is nothing new. Now, as we can see from these clips, money has a lot to do with it. But deep down, money is just a currency of security. You see, our society has lost faith in God and has to put its faith or its trust or its security in something else. I found a fascinating clip of Bishop Barron explaining the importance of trusting in God for our democracy to even work. This is a fascinating clip. Check this out.
I was very pleased to see recently the U.S. Supreme Court rejected the suit brought by Michael Newdow, who's a man from Sacramento, who's complained about the presence of religious mottos like "In God We Trust" on our coinage and paper money and on our public buildings. His claim, and you see it a lot in the last 30 or 40 years, that somehow the presence of these religious symbols in the public forum involve a violation of the First Amendment. And the First Amendment, which clearly said there should be no official establishment of religion in America, nor should the government restrict the free exercise of religion. The tired argument is that somehow even mentioning God in the public square or bringing religious symbols forward is a violation of this. And of course, it's ridiculous because the Founding Fathers knew very well what was involved in the establishment of an official religion. They knew about it from their English background, and they saw the previous couple centuries how terrible that was. They by no means, though, implied that somehow the eradication of religious language completely from the public square was an implication of this prohibition. And so I was pleased to see the U.S. Supreme Court gave very little time and attention to the complaint. See, I'm going to argue that, in fact, the aggressive eradication of religion from the public square is a very dire situation for our democracy. And though that's counterintuitive, I'm going to argue it. To see it, we have to go back to that stuffy and humid summer of 1776, as a young Virginia lawyer is laboring over the opening lines of a rather important document. I'm talking, of course, about Thomas Jefferson and the Declaration of Independence, putting the case for independence in the widest possible framework. Jefferson says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights." If you consult the history of political philosophy, let's say the classical thinkers, Plato, Aristotle, Cicero, and their colleagues, it would have struck them as the opposite of self-evident that all men are equal. They would have noticed enormous inequalities in intelligence, in courage, in virtue, in beauty, etc. And in fact, the recognition of these radical inequalities would become the foundation for a properly functioning political order. To tell Plato or Aristotle or Cicero that all people are equal and that the recognition of that equality is the foundation of a political order would have struck them as counterintuitive in the extreme. In fact, the just social order in Plato and Aristotle is founded upon a keen sense of radical inequality. Okay, so to me, simply as a political philosopher, the very interesting question is, how do we get from self-evidently false to self-evidently true? Why could someone as brilliant as Thomas Jefferson say in the 18th century, it's self-evidently the case that all people are equal? Well, the clue, the answer is in that little word that we kind of rush past without noticing. All men are created equal, Jefferson says, and that's the hinge. He knew as well as Plato and Aristotle that we are radically different in intelligence and beauty and virtue and all the other things, but he got from his Christian inheritance the view that we are all equally children of God. Take God out of the calculus, I would argue, and equality rather quickly disappears. What we're left with is the radical inequality that was recognized by the classical political philosophers. Here's a second thing. All men are created equal, and they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Again, go back to the classical political world. That all people have rights that are inherent in them, that can't be denied or taken away, would have struck Plato, Aristotle, or Cicero as counterintuitive in the extreme. Certain privileged people, certain people who had inherited the privilege from their aristocratic forebears, might be described as having rights and prerogatives and privileges. The vast majority of people, though, in ancient society were recognized as not being the subject of rights. Think of the prevalence simply of slavery in the classical world, and you see that. Again, what makes the difference? How do we go from it's self-evident that people don't have rights to Jefferson's claim that it's self-evident that they do? Again, it's the religious language. They are endowed by their Creator. Because all people have been created by God, they've been loved into being and destined for eternal life. Because of that, we recognize that they have inalienable rights and dignity. That means rights that can be neither granted by nor rescinded by any human institution or human contrivance. That's what Jefferson's seeing, and I'm arguing the only rational foundation for that is the theological claim that they have been endowed by their Creator with those rights. Now, watch something, and all you got to do to see this is look at the history of the 20th century. When the Creator God is explicitly denied, what follows in very short order is the denial of these inalienable rights. Look at Hitler's Germany. Look at Stalin's Russia. Look at Mao's China. Look at Pol Pot's Cambodia. Look at Castro's Cuba. What do you see? You see a systematic denial of these human rights. rights become anything but inalienable. They are granted by, guaranteed by the government to those whom the government favors, right? Take God out of the calculus, and once again, human rights quickly fall to the side. See, and this is why, for me, this is not just a question of, superficial, pious boilerplate. Isn't it nice having "In God We Trust" on our dollar bills to make us feel pious? It's much deeper than that. It's much more important than that. To say "In God We Trust" is to provide a democracy with its proper ground. See, a democracy involves, appropriately, the election of officials, the debating and deliberation about our political strategies. It involves a free press. It involves the rule of law. But all those things, legitimately constitutive of democracy, are grounded in certain moral absolutes that are not themselves the object of deliberation and debate. That all people are equal, that they are endowed with certain inalienable rights. We're not going to deliberate about that. We're not going to debate about that. Those are grounded in these properly theological intuitions. That's why it matters to say, "In God We Trust." And this is why, as a devotee of both Thomas Aquinas and Thomas Jefferson, I say bravo to the U.S. Supreme Court.